Welcome to the First Cut Podcast, live on the CBS Sports Network. We are halfway home in Paris. We are building towards a podium, hearing those national anthems be played, but there is still plenty of golf action to be had. We're going to get you up to date on everything that has gone on at Le Golf National thus far and look ahead to those final two rounds. Joining me to do just that, Mark Immelman is here. Mark, it's good to see you as usual.
Good to see you. Bonjour, boys. I've got to tell you, I've been enjoying the coffee golf. I was out of town yesterday, but it's been fun to just sit on the couch and watch a little golf for a week. It's been pleasant.
It has been pleasant indeed. Greg DuCharme rounding out our crew for today. Greg, good to have you.
Oh, good afternoon, gentlemen. It has been wonderful. I completely agree with Mark. Getting an opportunity to watch a little golf bright and early in the morning. There's few things better, and it's been a nice mix coming off the Scottish Open and the Open Championship. Getting that opportunity has been really fun. And by the way, it doesn't hurt when you're seeing fantastic golf like we are this week.
Yeah, fantastic golf being played indeed. If you're just tuning in for the first time and trying to figure out what's going on, 60 golfers represented by 31 different countries are playing 4 rounds. There is no cut, so even though we're at the halfway point, we're going to continue with 60 golfers into the weekend. And let's start with the golf course that they are battling this week, Mark, and that is Le Golf National. It's outside of Paris. It's a course that we have seen not only for the Ryder Cup, but more annually at the French Open, which is a DP World Tour event. And based on conditions that we've seen in the past and conditions that we are seeing so far through 2 rounds, the scoring has been really, really good this week. Guys are making a lot of birdies out there.
Les fangs have been dulled a little bit. Very much a function of the wind, the rain we've had, and not very much wind. This is an intimate golf course. It works its way between the dunes and such, and lots of fescue. And in the Ryder Cups and in the French Opens, ordinarily they pinch the fairways a little bit more. But certainly from my point of view, it appears the targets are a little wider, and those targets are made wider still by the softer conditions. And then, of course, you got some very receptive greens. Little wind, there was some just to make the boys think today. So if you could navigate your way around those final 3 holes, it was open season to get after this place.
Yeah, it really has been. Those soft conditions are definitely coming into play. And Greg, when you look at the challenge that these guys are taking on this week, the golf course playing more than a stroke under par each of the first 2 rounds, I certainly expected it to be a little bit more difficult. But like Mark said, these are just absolutely prime scoring conditions.
Yeah, and that plays a huge effect, Rick. I mean, you look at the last 10 renditions of the French Open, as you mentioned, on the DP World Tour, and the average winning score is about 10.7 under par. And right now, the leaders are already at 11 under par. But the most important thing to keep in mind here is that this is an outdoor game. And anytime when you're playing the game of golf, anytime you get conditions like this, the best players in the world are going to take advantage. You just can't design a golf course difficult enough to really penalize them and really make them think when the conditions are like this. They're just simply too good. So we've seen with the combination of light winds, a little wider targets for a couple different reasons, one being the graduated rough, one being the soft conditions in those fairways. But you combine all those aspects together, and this is what you get. You get an opportunity to make a lot of birdies. That being said, real quick here, there still are, if you do miss way offline and you hit it into some of that fescue, it's very penal. And there are still water hazards out there, plenty of them, that you have to keep your eye on.
Yeah, that's the thing that I wanted to dive into next, Mark, is I don't want to frame this to be a birdie fest where every single golfer in the field is going out there and putting together a 63 or a 64. That is not the case because of the way that there is water lurking out there, the way that the final stretch of holes plays more difficult. If you're looking at it statistically, 12 and 13 are both playing over par, or at least did in the second round. 15 very close to even par, and then 17 and 18 were the 2 most difficult holes on the golf course in the second round. And we saw plenty of doubles out there. So it is not like everyone is getting after it. There are still plenty of places where you've got to be strategic, you've got to be smart, and you have to execute.
Yeah, truly so, Rick. I love the design of the golf course. It sort of wanders in different directions, and so you're seeing different wind directions. on a lot of the holes. And then when you threw the meat of the golf course really in the first portion of the first 9 and then beyond, a lot of the holes kind of just turn gently. And then there's certain holes, I think of one, I think of 18 certainly, 16, the par 3 as well, where all of a sudden you got these very sharp edges with wooden bulkheads. And a lot of the targets sit angled to the fairway, or at least to the teeing ground. So if there's a tuck flag one way or the other, it's not necessarily that you can bounce the ball up there. And I saw a few hole locations, especially there in the closing stretch, those mean holes, where they were squeezed towards the edge of the green. And so then it becomes a cover distance thing, and you can't skip balls up there. So you have to be very precise with distance control. So to that being said, to Greg's observation with the graduated rough, with the fairways, to be able to attack some of these hole locations, it's almost paramount that you do put the ball in play off the tee, because even though the greens are somewhat receptive, if you're coming from the rough, it's just too unpredictable. And coming down that closing stretch with a crosswind, with these bulkheads, with the fine margins, I mean, we've seen doubles, we've seen triples, and worse made. So, yeah, you got to have your wits about you just about all the time.
Well, I've just seen those pin positions for round number 3, and Mark, it's going to be more of the same, tucking them near water hazards, not allowing you to roll balls up there, bounce balls up there. You're going to have to carry the whole darn thing. Now, Greg, let's dive deeper into this, because I think you were seeing, and as we thought earlier in the week, we would see, you can't just hit driver everywhere. You know, some of the best players in the world, we're seeing Rory McIlroy take less than drive. We're seeing Xander Schauffele, who has turned himself into an elite driver of the golf ball, not hit driver everywhere. You kind of have to take what this golf course is going to give you specifically off the tee, which then lends itself to what Mark is talking about, accessing pin locations, because you know the way the ball is going to come out of the fairway or potentially just the first cut.
Yeah, oftentimes when you see really narrow fairways and really thick rough, if you think of Wingfoot in 2020 for the U.S. Open, a driver becomes an advantage because everybody in the field is going to miss fairways. And when you do, you want the shortest club you can possibly have in. That strategy changes when you get to venues like we see at the Open Championship, with the exception of St. Andrews, where there's a significant penalty for hitting it into some longer fescue. And that's what you're seeing this week. Even though the fairways are a little wider and the rough is graduated and the conditions are soft, all those elements widen your landing area. The penalty for missing that landing area is just, in some cases, too severe to take that chance. Whether you have a wedge into the green or a 4-iron or anything in between, you still simply can't advance the ball. I mean, we saw Scotty Scheffler on, I believe it was the 7th hole today, move a ball about 4 feet in that long fescue. That's the best golfer in the world. So if you hit it way offline, no matter what hole it's on, you're going to be penalized. And one simple penalty, as we start to get into talking about some of the rounds of these players, one simple penalty has really taken guys from being right there in contention to having a whole lot of work to do over these final 2 rounds. So you have to be smart off the tee. You don't have to hit it in the fairway, but I think the word Mark used is perfect. You have to get the ball in play. That means within the bunker lines, right? Within the fescue. If you do that, then you have an opportunity to score.
Well, one final thought on this, Mark, because I think you were headed in this direction as well, or at least it got my brain going in that direction. The second 9 playing a half a shot more difficult, plus that closing stretch, having all of that water. When there is a lot on the line on Sunday and you're feeling the pressure and maybe you can't feel your hands, it's going to make for an incredibly exciting finish to this event.
You know what it does? And we saw this in the Ryder Cup when the Europeans romped to victory over the United States. We saw matches, if they got to 18, where guys were winning the 18th hole with bogeys and such because the conditions were more difficult. There was certainly wind. And of course, you have the pressure of the situation. Now, this week, I would counter, for the PGA Tour players, certainly, and the DP World players, that there's a different kind of a pressure. Quick side story. In Minneapolis last week when I was leaving on Sunday evening, I bumped into Erik van Rooyen, who is playing for the South African team in the Olympics. And we had a catch up, and he had missed the cut in Minneapolis. And I said to him, "Hey, Erik, you're an Olympian." And he got tears in his eyes. And he sort of gave me a hug, and I could feel the embraces like, yeah, this is a big deal, and I get to represent my country, call myself an Olympian. And then I looked at him, I'm like, you know, you got the game to really fit this place? And he sort of nodded, and I could see his lip quiver. And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, go get a medal, man. And he goes, why not aim high? And so with that being said, all of these guys feel this. So as you look to the closing stretch of holes, everyone's going to feel it. But I'm looking at this going, I feel like, and I hate to sort of forecast ill on one of the leaders, but someone's going to post something early. And then those leaders are going to come down there, and those last 3 holes are just going to become all the more brutal. Because 16 today, the par 3, front hole location, even though there's water, scoring club guys were having their way. Back right on Sunday, that thing is a beast. And of course, 18 is just nasty. So I'm seeing the thing here with 18 and how the back 9 plays, where they're on the fringes of the medal, where all of a sudden they do something special, like 31, like Scheffler did today on the back 9. You then sit and wait, because you kind of know that with the way the holes play, certainly on 18, things may kind of work in your favor a little bit.
Yeah, now you've got me feeling it, Mark, and we're going to continue this conversation. We're going to dive into the big movers, the top of the board, who stands to step onto the podium, and much more. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut podcast. We are diving headfirst into the Olympics, the golf competition for the men this week. The women will tee it up at Le Golf National next week, but we saw a lot of movement on the board in this second round. And Mark, I'll start here with you because the round of the day belonged to Thomas Detry, an 8 under 63 that was bogey free. He got off to a hot start, going out in 31 and adding 3 more birdies on his second 9. We have seen him play well more frequently on the PGA Tour. We've seen him pop up at a couple of major championships. He had a good finish at Valhalla, and he moved himself up 36 spots, now currently in a tie for 5th and just 3 shots off the lead.
Yeah, Thomas Detry. When you watch him play, you kind of wonder to yourself, how on earth does this guy ever shoot over par? Because he's big, he's tall, he's strong, he's got a beautiful golf swing, and he just seems to have it all. And you can see him kind of making his way on the PGA Tour as you watch him this year. You know, he's kind of lurking there and thereabouts, gets on the leaderboard and has one bad day, and then sort of finds his way back a little bit. So he's been the victim of that, because as far as the skill set goes, I feel like he has no weakness. He's got speed off the tee. He's fairly accurate for as long as what he hits it. He's just a beautiful iron player. And being from Belgium, he plays a game that sort of fits these conditions because it's a similar sort of grass setup. He flights the ball fairly low when he hits it well. So if the wind kicks up, it's playing into his favor. And because he hits it lower, I feel like the softer conditions kind of, you know, stun the golf course a little bit, because ordinarily with firm conditions, you're going to do the McIlroy thing where you go from upstairs and land them softly. But these soft conditions are going to allow these guys to drive balls into the target. But to me, all that being said, Thomas is a tremendously emotional young man. We've seen him since in college when he was in Champaign, Illinois, to his career on the European Tour, to the PGA Tour now, where he can lose it for a stretch of time and he can kind of get the hands off the wheel just a little bit. And I feel like perhaps that's why we see him do like 3 good rounds and one not so good round. But what he did to me was he got past his bad day in round 1 with even par to set him up for this day today. But as far as us going into the weekend now, where we get closer to you know the podium and medals and such, and you know, for a young Belgian boy to earn a medal in the Olympics would be a dream come true. I think that management of the emotion is going to be one of the keys, because the game comes easy to me. I was talking with his coach, Jerome Tiernis, just the other day, and Jerome was like, he's swinging great, man. Everything's there. So now it's that, you know, the space between the ears. And you're going to have the inevitable bogey or the inevitable bad shot. And you just got to find your way around that. Kind of do the Scotty Scheffler, if you will. And if Detry does that, he's got the chops to medal. He certainly does, because he's got that much game.
Yeah, he gave a great post-round interview, seemed very confident, loved where his game was at, and he is just brimming with emotion and confidence heading into the weekend. Now, he went out early, Greg, alongside Steven Jaeger, who also had one of the best rounds of the day. His was a bogey-free 7 under 64, and like we're seeing the trend here, you get out under par early and see how you can hold on, or at least just kind of advance your position on the second nine. That's exactly what Jaeger did, including an eagle on the par 5 third. He turned in 31 and also added 2 more birdies. But Jaeger's year has been a little bit weird, Greg, because he was the Scotty Scheffler slayer, right? He won the Houston Open at the time. He was one of the only guys who had beaten Scotty Scheffler on a leaderboard. But after that, the year has kind of gotten away from him a little bit, and maybe this week is acting as a nice little mini reset, and he's getting back into shape.
Yeah, well, it certainly seems that way, and it didn't after round one. You know, even par with the lead at 8 under, you don't really think you have much of a chance. But then you come out and shoot bogey-free 64, and things look a whole lot better. Now you're within 4 shots of the lead. You're up there on the first page of the leaderboard, and certainly in the mix. And something that I found to be really encouraging for Steven Jaeger is, you know, you mentioned, Rick, that the year kind of got away from him. And we saw a tremendous amount of consistency out of him with his ball striking. Both his driving and approach play was extremely consistent for a long time, really dating back to last year. He gained a little bit of speed in his game, really improved his driver distance, which made a big difference. But like you said, he seemed to have lost it a little bit. Well, in this second round, he gained over 2 strokes, both off the tee and approaching the green on the rest of the field. He hit the ball really nicely. And then you add into that, he held 5 putts outside of 12 feet. And in his post-round interview, he said in round one, you know, he thought that he hit the ball quite nicely, but didn't get anything out of it because of what happened on the greens. Well, and in round two was a totally different story. He actually capitalized on some of the great shots he was hitting.
Yeah, just 4 shots off of the pace right now. And speaking of guys who are looking to find that consistency again, Mark, Matt Fitzpatrick fired another 7 under 64, but he did it in a little bit of a different fashion. He was only 3 under at the turn, and then he took advantage of some of the holes on the second nine with birdies on 12, 14, 16, and 17. There were not a lot of circles on those holes or on the back nine in general. So Fitzy beats the field by a significant margin on that second nine and moves himself up to 5 under and a tie for 13th.
It's been an uncharacteristic, I guess I'd call it, year for Matt Fitzpatrick, because you felt like after the season where he won the RBC Heritage, knocking off Jordan Spieth in a playoff, then he wins the US Open, and you're like, okay, the sky's the limit, because he was always this kid who had everything. You know, it's not like he had the power that Thomas Detry had, but Matt Fitzpatrick is managerial. And if there's someone who's a planner and who is like A-type and pragmatic and doesn't ever make a mental mistake, Matt Fitzpatrick's your guy. And we started to see him parlay that stuff into victories because he really tightened up the iron game. He put a new set of irons in the bag, which I felt like might have sort of taken a while to settle down. But we've seen the semblance where it looks like now that things are kind of going in the right direction. So I'm sure he's happy to see that day, because as far as he's concerned, Matt Fitzpatrick, in his mind, is not just a field filler in these big events. He's a guy that should be close to the podium, if not on top of it. So I'm certain he was happy about today. And I'm certain, again, another low ball hitter, you know, a guy who's comfortable on these kind of greens that are a little slower, where you can hit the ball a little harder, that he's now feeling, okay, let's get ourselves some good rest. Let's get busy on the weekend, because now all bets are off.
Yeah, all bets are off indeed. Matt Fitzpatrick, a major champion, trying to kind of get back into that level of form. And Greg, we'll finish with this, because I think maybe the most impressive round of the day was Guido Migliozzi's 4 under 67. And I say that because he was one of the final groups to go out on Friday, round number 2, and conditions were much more difficult. And he moves up 13 spots into a tie for 8th. And if you look at his recent run on the DP World Tour, he had a win a couple of starts ago, a runner-up finish a few starts prior to that. He's been playing great golf, and now he's showing it on a more international stage.
Yes, and he has some experience here at the French Open as well. In fact, he's a winner at the French Open. So it's a golf course that certainly gets along with Guido. He hit 16 of 18 greens of regulation during this round, which is very impressive. And it really takes a lot of pressure off of your short game. Of course, you don't have to scramble for pars constantly. You're giving yourself birdie looks constantly. He gained 1.6 strokes approaching the green in both of these opening rounds, which has been very consistent. And the big difference for him in round 2 compared to round 1 was what he did on the greens. You look at what he did. I mean, he was 3 shots better in strokes gained putting from round 2 compared to round 1, gained over a shot and a half in round 2, and obviously was losing strokes in the opening round. So really impressive stuff with that 67 from Guido Migliacci.
Yeah, he's been splendid, and we'll see if he can continue going into the weekend. There are so many big names in this field. We are going to get to the notables. We've got to talk podium. We've got to look ahead. So much more to do, but we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast, getting you all up to date on everything that's going on in Paris right now for the men's golf competition at the Olympics. And let's get to some notable names. And unfortunately, Mark, they can't all be good days for the notables. We'll start with Viktor Hovland here, who has struggled to back up his FedEx Cup championship season of 2023 with good results in 2024. And his second round got off to a horrible start. Water balls on each of his first 2 full swings of the day. He leaves the first hole with a 7, a triple bogey, which ends up forcing him to turn in 40. It was a 4 under 75 when the dust settled, and Viktor only has a few more starts to get this thing going as we are approaching the end of the PGA Tour regular season.
Yeah, the 4 over par round today sort of signals what has been a pretty turbulent year for Viktor. You know, he's coming off that massive season last year where he won the FedEx Cup among other victories, and it looked like the sky was the limit. And then he goes to the Ryder Cup and he becomes a superstar almost overnight. And you know, it's hard always, as I've been around these guys, to follow up that sort of form. But you spoke of the triple bogey to start, and you can see that 7 there. That's on the heels of finishing with a double bogey on 18 the night before in round 1, because through the first 15, 16 holes in round 1, he was just plodding along, had made like 3 birdies, was lurking around the show, 3 under, was not that far off the pace. And I was like, okay, here we go. And he was playing alongside John Rahm and Rory, so it was one of those megawatt groups. And so I felt like, okay, here's Viktor. He's sort of brought a little game. But you have that rough finish. Then you go back to the hotel and the French food doesn't taste so great, and you're a little irate. And then knowing Viktor, who's very quizzical, he's inquiring, he starts asking questions. He goes, okay, what's going on of myself mentally? And then perhaps, now I'm just speculating here, but I know how golfers work. Then you come back the next morning and you've got to try and rectify the thing that might not be that far wrong. You get there on the first, which is not the easiest opener in the world, with water all the way down the left-hand side. You tweak one, which is the big miss for him because he's gone back to that expressly left to right pattern. Then all of a sudden you hit it in the water, and then you're like, okay, now your entire apple cart is upset mentally, and from there it just becomes hard. And those fairways start to creep in on you, and then it's amazing how the golfing mind can go back to, you know, stuff that was happening a few months ago where he was struggling with a golf swing. Because the Viktor I saw at the PGA Championship looked like he had turned the corner where the golf swing was, where he was bouncing around between golf instructors. But I think the finish last night carried into this morning. The triple bogey start didn't help, but this is just a lot of the same. And as far as the playoffs go for Viktor Hovland, certainly I think this Olympics, with him being, you know, a few over par through 2 rounds, I think medaling is sort of out of the question. So now it's time to just go and find something on the weekend so he can carry that into a big finish as we go through the playoffs, just like he did last year with a victory at the BMW Championship and then eventually at East Lake in the Tour Championship.
That's right. It was a gut punch out of the gate in round number 2, but he did get hot this time last year en route to that FedEx Cup championship. And we'll see if he can find something over the weekend, like Mark had mentioned. A little bit better news for Rory McIlroy, though, based on his own expectations. Greg, maybe not the greatest start for him. 68 and 69, another 2-pencil day for Rory, who eagled the par 5 third. He made a double on the par 4 17th. A lot of birdies and some bogeys along the way. I've been inspired by the firepower that Rory has shown over the first 2 days. He's making plenty of numbers below par, but he's also been a little bit sloppy, a little bit too many crooked numbers on the card for Rory this week.
Yeah, it's been a challenge for, a couple of reasons, Rick. There's been a few things in Rory's game that have been a little bit disappointing. All in all, he's hitting the ball really well. He's hitting a lot of really high quality shots. He's hit 28 of the first 36 greens. He's hit 20 of the first 28 fairways. He's fourth in strokes gained approach. Yet when you look at the mistakes, there's so many ball striking mistakes that Rory has made. Some big misses to the left-hand side. So with both irons and what we've seen off the tee for him, they just seem to pop up out of nowhere. And then you see, like with the eagle that he made today, he hits the flagstick from 261 yards. So the good is really good. There's just a couple of loose shots that have been penalized severely on this golf course so far. And the last thing I would add on Rory McIlroy is he's got to clean it up a little bit on the greens. Because he is swinging really well in general, the putting has kind of been letting him down a little bit. That being said,
yeah, right.
It's a great opportunity for him to kind of step up over the next couple of days and make a big move up this board.
Yeah, he could go out there and fire a low one. He's currently 6 shots off the pace, so he's not completely out of it, but we are going to need to see some massive fireworks at least one of these final 2 rounds. And probably same story for Scotty Scheffler, Mark. He is 6 under par for the tournament, 67, 69. He's only 5 back. The problem might be some of those guys that are already sitting at 11 under par. But this was kind of a unique round for Scotty, who turned in 38. That is 2 over. His front 9, 8 pars and a double. Ooh, that's tough, but he found a different gear on the second 9. He made 4 birdies with no bogeys to post that 69. So you can never count Scotty out of this, but again, like Rory, we're going to need a low one at some point.
Yeah, Rick, he looked dead to rights, on the front 9. I mean, it was ragged for Scotty Scheffler, even though, the statistics will show that he was striking the golf ball well. It just didn't look like he had the command that he normally did. And just to kind of compare, if you can, to Rory, it felt like to me that they both were Morikawa, maybe even on the slightly slower greens. Kerry Haig calls them championship speed, but in Europe, they're always a little slower than the United States. You feel like, okay, the guys were just struggling with some of the reads. And I saw many, many putts, both out of Scheffler and McIlroy, where they would hit the putt, and then they'd stand up almost flummoxed going, really, it went that way? And that's just a function of the speed. So it seemed like perhaps he found a little groove over the back 9. I'm just questioning, Scotty Scheffler and the mindset coming into this Olympic Games. Obviously played in the Open Championship, then comes in here, and I was struck by his press conference and some of the comments he made, because they asked him, what's your goal this week? And he goes, oh, just to have fun. And the Scotty Scheffler I normally hear is like, no, I'm here to compete. And you'll hear him when you listen to press conferences, he uses the word compete often. And I'm like, Scotty, ordinarily you show up and you compete. But look, everyone's going to come here and they're going to watch the gymnastics and the sprinting and all sort of stuff. But he's come over here with a family, which is normal, really. But, when he said, I'm here to have fun and enjoy the experience, you can respect that. He's the number 1 golfer in the world. I'm sure he's got designs on the gold medal. And perhaps today was that wake-up call, because something did happen after 9 holes. I mean, he turned into Scotty Scheffler on the second 9. Perhaps he was like, okay, enough of this messing around now. It's time to do Scotty Scheffler stuff, and he did. So I feel like it keeps him relevant, at least with a chance over the weekend.
I think Scotty would probably tell us that winning is pretty fun, and maybe that's the fun that he's trying to have. But yes, noteworthy use of vocabulary for Scottie Scheffler. We are going to the top of the board, the potential podium. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut Podcast live on CBS Sports Network. And gentlemen, it's time to look at the top of the board. 3 men, a trio of 11 under par scores. If this was the final round, if this was complete, we'd have a 3-way playoff for gold, silver, and bronze, which is absolutely sick to think about, but still 2 more rounds to go. Let's start with our overnight leader, Greg. That was Hideki Matsuyama, who entered the second round at 8 under par and played well. He went out in 35. That's 1 under. He had 4 more birdies on the second 9. He had opened up a multiple shot lead on the rest of this field until the 18th hole, bites back a double bogey on 18 to fall back to 11 under par. Obviously not a great way to finish, but at the halfway point, Hideki's got to share the lead.
Yeah, the finish was disappointing. You know, he missed that tee shot to the right, which is very common because there's water all the way down the left-hand side. And then from that fescue, unable to advance it all the way to the fairway, and then hit it in the water from there. So we really did make a mess of number 18. It was a 1-putt double bogey, which is kind of impressive, and it highlights what Hideki has done so well this week. He leads this field in strokes gained putting. So normally, Rick, we look at this model at the halfway mark, and we're thinking, well, the guys that are doing the best tee to green are the guys that are going to carry this forward. The guys that are leaning on their putter too much, well, maybe there's going to be a little regression. But when I see Hideki Matsuyama's name leading the field in strokes gained putting, I think that is a very exciting aspect because he's one of the best ball strikers in our game. And as you have pointed out many times on the First Cut podcast, he's been hitting the ball pretty well this year as well. Even though it's felt a little inconsistent, it's felt like a stop and start kind of year. I just keep thinking back to what he did at Riviera in the Genesis Invitational, where he keeps himself in the mix. And he's one of those guys on the weekend that can get red hot with his irons and just start throwing everything at the flag and walk away with the gold medal. I think that's a real possibility at this point.
Yeah, Hideki gave a post-round interview after round 1 saying he's been dealing, with those injuries kind of on and off this year. But when he is healthy and he's at his best is some of the best in the world. That is for sure. Also, that goes for Xander Schauffele, who is trying to steal the spotlight away from Scottie Scheffler in 2024, Mark, and he is at it again. He has opened up with a 65-66, and he could conceivably defend his gold medal. And I understand that golf has not been in the Olympics very long, but there is a chance that on Sunday evening, Xander Schauffele holds 40% of all the gold medals ever given out in our sport. It's crazy stuff what he's doing right now.
I love the way you will find a way to put a number to a full observation like that. Look, brace yourself, boys. I'm about to hit you with a statement here. And I know here in golf media, there's a recency bias, and there's always a tyranny of the urgent, all of these emotions we go through. But Xander Schauffele right now, I would argue vehemently that he is a more complete player than Scottie Scheffler. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, and the record certainly proves it over recent months with 2 major championships and now lining up another gold medal in the Olympics, and every other performance he puts on. Every time he tees it up, it's like he never puts a foot wrong. If the ball striking's not there, he's a tremendous putter. Well, people don't know that this man, we all know that they work hard, but he dots every I and crosses every T in the biggest way. Before every round of tournament golf, he spends at least 30 to 40 minutes on the putting green going through the same putting preparation regimen every single time. I joked with him about it at the Travelers Championship, and he laughed. He goes, yeah, sometimes Austin has to pull me off the putting green and say, yo, bro, you got to hit some golf balls now because we're teeing off in 15 minutes. But that's just how he is, because now the golf swing is settled, the work with Chris Como, and he has a multi-directional ball flight when he needs it. He still goes to the draw, but he has that softer, more controllable fade, if you will. But on and around the greens, he's magical. And then he's got this, maybe even it's the Germanic in him from his dad, former aspirant Olympian, his father, Stefan. He's got a really quiet competitor's mind. And whenever I've been on the golf course with him, even if stuff is going haywire, you never see it. You can see most players, they'll get kind of hot around the collar, or you'll see the shoulders slump. Xander's the same guy. And alongside Austin Kaiser, they are making a world-class combination. And he is a world-class golfer. I would argue the best in the world right now. And if you want to win this gold, you better stay in front of Xander Schauffele.
A 66 for Xander Schauffele. It was a 68 for Hideki Matsuyama, but the best round out of any of these three, Greg, was from Tommy Ladd. Tommy Fleetwood's 7 under 64. That was bogey-free. It was blemish-free. It was perfect until the 18th hole jumped up and got him as well. A bogey there to drop him to 7 under and that 64. But Tommy is looking for that big resume builder. We have talked about this ad nauseum throughout his career, trying to win the big one, trying to win on the PGA Tour. This won't count as a PGA Tour victory, but a gold medal. That would be the statement that Tommy's looking for.
It would definitely help. And it would be a very Tommy Fleetwood type victory, right? Because it's a big time tournament, and he's won big time tournaments, just not on the PGA Tour. He's won in Dubai. He's many times. He's won on the DP World Tour. He won the French Open right here at Le Golf National. He went 4-1 in the Ryder Cup right here at Le Golf National. His game is built for this place. And I think this would be a very typical victory for Tommy Fleetwood, and one that I think is a real possibility. We've seen his iron play start to, kind of diminished a little bit in the Scottish swing and the Scottish Open and the Open Championship. It seems to have really picked back up this week. We've seen some really high quality strikes out of Tommy Fleetwood. And of course, he's keeping the ball in front of him as well off the tee, giving himself those opportunities. The one thing you may have questions about with Tommy is what happens when he gets on the greens. He's been a very good putter, but under pressure, sometimes that can wane. And we've seen some long putts going. He's made a couple putts over 20 feet this week so far, which has been a huge bonus for him and was definitely a big part of this second round.
Those three golfers, Hideki Matsuyama, Xander Schauffele, Tommy Fleetwood, all at 11 under par. They are 2 shots clear of the rest of the field. The closest chaser, potentially the biggest spoiler mark, is Jon Rahm, who shot a 67 in round 1, followed it up with a 66 in round 2. And round 2 offered the firepower that Jon Rahm has. He had 2 separate birdie streaks. He birdied 2, 3, and 4. He birdied 14, 15, and 16. Only one other non-par score on the card. That was a bogey on the par 3 8th hole. Jon Rahm is starting to get his game in order, and he is trying to go and grab a spot on that podium from the big three.
Hey, quickly on Tommy. I love Tommy. Love Tommy Fleetwood. But I don't like him after he let me down in the Open Championship in one and done. Yeah. More importantly, Jon Rahm, look, he's becoming, to me over recent weeks here, the Jon Rahm that we were talking about years ago, where everyone's glowing about how great he is and how he's an incredible ball striker and he's got this mindset that nobody would beat him. But then he ventured off to live, and it felt like he was almost playing with a bit of a point to prove. And you could see that ordinarily a guy who tends a little irritable on the golf course almost looked more so. It's like he was trying too hard. And in round 1, when I watched it a little bit, it looked like there was that going on with Jon again. He's coming off the victory on the Live Tour, so clearly the game is there, and he had played well at the Open Championship. He was in contention, but then round 1 was kind of stuttery a little bit. There were a couple eagles, I believe it was, and a double bogey, and it was all kind of ragged. But then today, it looked like he just settled down. The ordinarily brisk golf swing looked way better timed to me today. He had both trajectories, high and low, going on. He had the fade and the draw working. Every iron shot he hit, he was completely into balance. And it looked like, hold on, I was like, wow, hold on a second. Guess who's back? And Jon Rahm, when he's back, he's like one of those names on the leaderboard where guys know that, look, this dude is not going to go away. So it looked to me like he almost became comfortable with who he was again. And he's like put all the noise aside and he's like, here's me, I'm inside the ropes. No matter what's going on, I can do this and I can win. I've proved it. I'm a multiple major champion and I've won big events. And for a Spanish guy with, it's not that long a commute for the Spanish folks to come up to Paris, catch a quick train, you're there in a few hours, and they were showing out en masse today. So if he can get some of the crowd behind him, who knows? I mean, the guy had kind of become the anti-hero a little bit, might just become the hero of the weekend because he's got what it takes. And to me, looks way more comfortable again.
There are 7 golfers either at the lead or within 3 shots. They represent 7 different countries, and there is still 36 holes left to be played at the Olympics. We're going to get you set for the final 2 rounds, but first, we're going to take a quick break. Welcome back to the First Cut podcast, and we are looking ahead to the weekend for the Olympic Games, and we're looking at what Vegas has to think about how this will play out. It's no surprise, gentlemen, that tied atop the leaderboard, Xander Schauffele is the man to beat. He's the favorite to defend his gold medal, plus 175. Tied with him, Tommy Fleetwood, 4-1, and Hideki Matsuyama is 6-1. But look at that name in the middle there. Jon Rahm, 2 shots back at 9 under, trying to play spoiler to those 3 at 11. If you think that the winner can come from farther back, Scotty Scheffler, currently 5 shots off the lead, is 12-1. Tom Kim, only 3 back, 20-1. Rory McIlroy is 33-1 alongside Thomas Detry. So those are the odds to win. Mark, you get first crack at this. Is there anything on that board that you like to see?
Well, after glowing about Xander, I guess I have to go with Xander. But I really like the look of Hideki Matsuyama. Greg kissed it with the observation about the putting. We know he can strike it. That the week that he won at Riviera, I was there for the closing stretch of holes. And everyone will look back to the irons he hit to collectively about 4 feet over the last 3 holes, and there were 3 of them. But he made a number of putts before that on perennial greens that were perfect for speed, perfect for line, and he looks like he's reading greens very well. So at that number for Hideki, I think he's worth a flutter.
That number is 6-1 on Hideki Matsuyama to be standing atop the podium. These are your gold medal numbers. Greg, was there something on that board that caught your attention?
Yeah, well, Scotty Scheffler still, I mean, I know that he's 5 shots back, but that's not really a big stretch. You look at what he did on this second 9 today, that could be a really good sign. So you get someone who has been extremely reliable this season, who knows how to win, and maybe had a little, as Mark put it, a little wake-up call. I think 2 rounds, he's got enough time to make something up. But the other one who I find interesting, wasn't even on the board, is CT Pan. He medaled last time in Tokyo. And you look at what he's done so far this week, he is leading the field in strokes gained approach. I really like the way CT Pan has gone about playing. And if you look at his record this year on the PGA Tour, it's been very inconsistent. But when he gets it, he really gets it. He's had strong finishes both in Mexico, where he finished tied 3rd, and he finished tied 2nd at the John Deere Classic as well. If you're thinking the John Deere Classic doesn't quite have the field like this, or the meaning, but that may be true. But when CT Pan gets it going, gets it together, he can really run hot. So he wasn't on the board there, but he's at 8 under, and I think could be a factor heading into the weekend as well.
69-65 for CT Pan. That will put him 3 shots back. Mark Immelman and Greg DuCharme, thank you very much. I also think I endorse that Hideki Matsuyama at 6-1 number. He's playing well. He's putting well. That's a similar number to what we saw from last week. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And of course, if you like what you've heard, you can continue to listen to the First Cut podcast. You can get it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. If you want to watch, we can have that available for you too. Near daily shows on YouTube. It's the Golf on CBS YouTube channel.